everyone. I'm Leroy Oscar Tanner. I'm the Programming and Technology Services Librarian at the New Ulm Public Library. And we're here at Red Dragon Gaming over on Minnesota Street in New Ulm. And we're excited to have author Christopher D. Schmitz here to talk to us about his works and some of the things that he does. He's the author of both science fiction and fantasy, fiction and nonfiction books, and has been published in both traditional and independent outlets. If you've looked into indie writers of the upper Midwest, you may have heard his name whispered in dark alleys with an equal mix of respect and disdain. He's been featured on television broadcasts, podcasts, and runs a blog for indie authors, but you've still probably never heard of him. As an avid consumer of comic books, movies, cartoons, and books, especially sci-fi and fantasy, this child of the 80s basically lived out Stranger Things, but shadowy government agencies won't let him say more than that. He lives in rural Minnesota with his family, where he drinks unsafe amounts of coffee. The caffeine shakes keep the cold from killing him. And in his off time, he plays haunted bagpipes in places of low repute. So without further ado, Christopher.
Thank you. Hold the applause.
I don't know.
Put the tomatoes away. Yes. So, funny story. Actually, it was near here, I think, where my bagpipes got haunted. I left my. So I play bagpipes on the side. It's just something fun that I do, and I played a funeral. Oh, what's the big park down in between here and Mankato?
Mineopa?
Yeah, down Mineopa. And accidentally, the mosquitoes were so bad, I was getting bit up, and I was putting my bagpipes away. Left them on a headstone for 3 weeks. I just could not find them. I got home and got out of my kilt and all of that, and didn't even think about where are my bagpipes. I was just they're there, and get a phone call later on oh, I need you to come play some bagpipes. I'm like, where are my bagpipes? I was looking all over for them, and finally I wind up calling the what do you call the gravekeeper anyway? The gravekeeper? All right. Well, there is a word for it, the cemetery groundskeeper or something. I call him Old Man Dampy from Legend of Zelda. He's always named Dampy. And he's like, maybe you could come out and find it. He went out and he's like, I looked all over. Well, he actually manages 2 grounds, and it was confusing. So I wound up driving out here and walking. I'm like, there they are, sitting on a headstone. They've been there. I'm like, pretty sure they're haunted now. So anyway, I thought I would tell you guys a little bit about, talk a little bit about cons, fandom, and what makes nerds tick. So I'm a nerd. It's nice that nerd is no longer an insult. Back in the day, when I grew up, in the 80s, it really was. It was you're a nerd, you're a geek. It's well, when you're flipping my burgers later on and I'm making $1 million, I don't have $1 million. But anyway, it was a good insult at the time. So anyway, I remember one of my earliest memories. Well, not my earliest memories, but I remember being in elementary school, and do they still even dress up for Halloween elementary school? I know back in the day it was super cool. So Stranger Things season 2, they're all wearing their costumes to school. I'm yeah, that is awesome. I remember I was probably in the 3rd grade, and I went to this General Kale from Willow. When I was nobody was even knew who General Kale was. So I was I remember being so mad. I'm what? What do you mean I can't bring a sword to school, right? But anyway, General Kale was super cool. I was really big into Masters of the Universe. Got my He-Man action figure here. I lost all my He-Man action figures in a fire, actually. But I've been collecting all of these. I'll go to comic conventions and find people that have loose figures. And this was the same model of the He-Man that I had. So that's why I decided to bring him. But Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, and of course, both those guys had awesome swords. And I really dig the new 2000s release of Master of the Universe with the kind of that cool steampunk sword, the kind of turns and stuff. It's super cool. Anyway, so my love affair with fantasy really started when I saw Willow. So I remember D&D was big, especially, top end of the 70s into the 80s, and then we had a lady come out with a group called Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons. And I came from a very, very like evangelical, hyper-religious kind of home. My mom's gotten over it. She's now bought her grandkids like Magic the Gathering cards and stuff, but she kind of bought into a lot of the hype. And I remember standing at a drugstore shopping for back to school days, and like I found this cool folder that I wanted, in the Age of the Trapper Keeper, and like Lisa Franklin's Lisa Frank was like, look, just this is what's the Tiger King guy, right? He was like, before he was cool, Lisa Frank was like already doing what the Tiger King was doing, but it was a dragon, and she's like, no, we don't do dragons in this house. Well, we do now. But so she was like, we don't do that. But my mom let me watch Willow, mainly I think because it had Val Kilmer in it, and my mom liked Val Kilmer. I've never really figured that part out, but you get it. But she did also like sci-fi. I remember as a kid snapping beans for my mom to can and freeze and all that, and she would rent all the Star Wars movies, and like that was just like, all right, guys, 2 days snapping beans, and we're gonna sit around, we're gonna watch the Star Wars movies, and we did that pretty much every year throughout my younger elementary years. I remember that very keenly, and of course they've got really cool swords. They got the laser swords. They should never ever call them laser swords. I think George Lucas learned that after Episode 1. That was one of the stupidest lines in a movie ever. Besides, now this is pod racing. I don't like sand. There's so much good bad content in there. Good bad content. If you're looking for bad movie lines, such a good movie series with so many terrible lines. Anyway, so my mom was also big into Star Trek though, which was nice. So remember every Sunday we'd sit down it was probably late afternoon after lunch, and Star Trek, either the original series or Star Trek TNG was on. And that was, so I had a lot of sci-fi growing up, which was great. And I read a lot of Golden Age sci-fi as well. I was big into reading because we didn't have TV. It was one of those, like, it was, I mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of an anarchist, right? Like, just down with the government. And it stems from this reason. Property taxes. Part of our local city property taxes, we're going to run cable lines to all the homes so everybody can get cable for like either cheaper or for, very, or in some cases free. And they're like, no, there's a big field next to that house. Like, yeah, it's in city limits technically. You're supposed to run it there, but we're not going to do that. So I was like the only kid that didn't have cable. So I wound up reading a lot of books and becoming an anarchist. So those things just go hand in hand. So anyway, I had some notes I should come back to. So I've always loved swords. That's all of that. And so while I didn't have cable TV, what I did have was an overactive imagination and about 15 acres of woods to play in this big field, like I was saying. So I remember we built a deck out in front of our house when I was a kid. And my dad put lattice around the bottom to keep out animals and stuff like that, right? And after a while, lattice just kind of sits there and it can kind of peel away. And we're peeling off pieces of lattice and making like swords out of them. And it was super cool. They probably really sucked. But I remember making all these swords out of like wooden lattice and going out and just having a million adventures. Nowadays, you would never let a kid go out and do that. It's basically like, get out of the house, kid, you're annoying. And go get lost in the woods. That's exactly what I would do. And just like be gone. It's amazing I'm alive based on what our parents did to us in the 80s, which was just ignore us. That's fine. I've got kids. I ignore them too. Fast forward a few years, TMNT, right? Ninja Turtles comes out. Not only they have swords, but they're ninjas and they're mutant turtles. That's just cool. So I loved TMNT. I was a little bit older. Like you don't remember, you get to that certain age group where it's like, we don't do cartoons or action figures anymore. We're too cool for that. And like that was kind of right where I was in that age group. So you get some of the kids who are just absolute jerks, and they're going to be mean to the other kids because that's what kids do. Because we're humans, and sometimes humans suck. And so anyway, so they're kind of bullying some of these kids, some of my friends and stuff. Like, you guys watch baby shows or whatever, you know. And I'm like, shut up, it's cool. Like, no, it's not. I'm like, okay, I guess it's not. This is what we do in junior high. I mean, we listen to the crowds. And but I remember one of the kids that was part of that group, they were like, no, you can't do any of that Ninja Turtle stuff. Well, what came after Ninja Turtles was Power Rangers. So I got all these conventions with my books, and they always got like all these, like they'll bring in one of the, this was the Puce Ranger on Power Rangers Turbo Flush something. I don't know. There's so many Power Rangers. And I'm just like, I don't know who that is. So anyway, I'm at this kid's house. My dad and his dad were good friends when they were in high school. And like I said, I grew up in this town. I grew up in was like 500 people. So like everybody knew everybody. So my dad sent me over to pick up a tool from him because his dad was a carpenter. And I went over, and he was a year older than me, and he was like, Ninja Turtles are dumb, that's for little kids. And I walk into his house, he's laying on the carpet like this, watching Power Rangers. I'm just like, him and I, we looked at each other, and it's just like, you know, sometimes you say things with your eyes, you never say, it's just like, let's never talk about this. Please never tell my friends I watch Power Rangers. And I'm like, whatever, man, just give me the tool. So anyway, discovered he was a huge Power Rangers. His name was Travis. I'm telling the world now. Travis liked Power Rangers. What I think though, what makes fandoms tick, what makes nerds tick, is community. I think interconnecting with each other, whether it's at the gaming table or just sharing the love of certain things, it is extremely important. And I think that, you know, whether we evolved this way, whether we were created this way, whatever that looks like in your personal beliefs and theories, it's undeniable that we need each other. Remember that when you go vote, right? It doesn't matter who people vote for, we still need each other. Can't we all just be nice? So I understood this from a real young age. I made a lot of friends who were maybe, like I remember seeing kids that would get picked on, and I was like, you know what? That kid needs a friend. So I intentionally made friends with the kids that didn't wear the right kind of clothes. They weren't into the right sorts of things. They weren't watching sports maybe. They were watching cartoons. I was like, I like cartoons and sports. So I kind of floated between a few different groups. That led to me winding up trying to defend some of my friends in fights. Actually, I got picked on a lot. I wound up like almost getting kicked out of school in junior high for fighting. And then it's weird because junior highs are weird, right? As soon as like you get like through that weird stage, never had to fight again. I wanted to have more fights. I'm like, I'm good at it. Come on, stop being jerks and I'll stop beating you up. So anyway, now I sound like the bully. I need to really re-examine my life, I guess. Anyway, I'm the good guy in my story. I'm for real. I mean it. But anyway, so I got picked on a lot, mainly because of the friends that I had made. But I did want still to fit in, even with the kids that maybe were mean to me. So I did what a lot of kids do. I went out and I joined sports, even maybe sports that are so bad at basketball. So bad. Pretty good at football. I actually played on a Minnesota state championship team. We were undefeated. We went 2 years state champs. One year we lost. We were the state champ runner-up. We lost to the next. Let me restart. All right. In my junior year, we went to the state championship undefeated. We lost to Cromwell. And the next year, my senior year, we were undefeated. We wound up facing Cromwell again, who had also been undefeated now for almost 2 years, and we won. So in 2 years, these two teams met each other at the state championships. It was like Disney story, right? Like they both lost, but only to each other. So cream of the crop. Made a lot of good friends that way. But also, right, in sports, there's a certain amount of bullying that's encouraged from the top down. Coaches, you know, kind of see the competitive edge as maybe something to be cultivated for athletic reasons at times. So I tried a bunch of different sports. Some of them I was really bad at. I was okay at football, but I joined Golden Gloves boxing. And some of those bullies showed up at a fight one time just to watch, hey, let's see what this is all about. And Then we were all friends after that because I beat the living tar out of my opponent, and he actually quit boxing that night. He's like, I'm done, I'm out. So that was kind of fun. But sometimes you have a little conflict, and then everybody gets over it. It's like, okay, well, now we know where the boundaries are, right? So anyway, which is also good in community when you're engaging with each other. Maybe know what not to say in a group. We were talking earlier about the guy in the D&D group, right? Like coming into play. He's like, just please shut up. Just stop talking. We're trying to watch the movie, man. There's rules here. I love Sheldon Cooper all the time at Big Bang Theory. He's like, we've got to obey the social norms and the societal cues. It's like, yes, please. Just somebody teach the guy the thing. Just whatever I have to do to get you to shut up. You're thinking that about me right now. That's okay. But I have the microphone on, so I'm not going to. Anyway, so I never really felt like I belonged in some of those groups, especially in the sports groups. But my current job is I get to work with teenagers, and I chase kids and plug them into groups in a community. That's maybe how they feel. So I look for the kids that are maybe they're not involved in sports. They don't have a coach chasing them or a teacher that's looking for this kid. So the kids that are falling through the cracks, and I tend to grab them, and I try and engage them in things like Pathfinder, D&D, whether they play Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever the game is, or Zombicide has been a huge one for me, because especially games that are co-op, because then they don't feel like it's them against everybody else. And that now includes them. So we try and include them in the fandom and get them going. And it's been great. I've seen kids now, because I've been doing this for almost 10 years over in Redwood Falls. And I see kids now that are adults. They're having their own kids. And I got to know them and really have a profound impact in their life through gaming, through including them in our local community. And with that... Now that's all the setup maybe for why I wrote this book. I thought I didn't really have a great reason for writing the book. I just wanted to write something that was funny, that was engaging, that was steeped in nerd culture. Basically all the things that kind of came out of me. And it was a reviewer actually that had read, and he's like, these are some of the great things that I pulled out of this book. I'm like, I was just being funny. I didn't realize I wrote a real serious moment, but I kind of did. And I'm like, I really like what he had to say, and only in kind of looking back at my life and maybe where I was as a kid and my story, did I realize that this just kind of organically came out of who I was. So I'm going to give you the setup though, real quick, so you know who the characters are in the story. There's this like hard-boiled noir detective, Sergeant Rick Diego. He's like, in my mind, he's like The Rock. He's like super serious. Like he doesn't even own a television. He's like doesn't watch any movies. He knows nothing about popular culture. He just solves crimes and kicks bad guys' butts. Like if you've seen Kindergarten Cop, right? The beginning scene, you got Arnold. He's like walking through like the smoking alley, and he's just like kicking in the door and shoots the bad guys, all serious. And then you have another guy, Moses Farnsworth, who's clumsy, a little overweight. He's a beat cop who just finally, after the third try, made detective. And he loves all things nerd culture. He winds up partnered with Rick Diego, whose partner was recently murdered, because it turns out like Moses has seen this clue. It's just like that happened in that one comic book. It's like, what? So they look into it like, absolutely. There's somebody who's like using comic books like the plot lines that killed this cop. And further, they discover a plot to murder Will Wheaton at Comic-Con. They assume it's probably... At first, they think it could be Michael Dorn, who's Worf, in Star Trek, because Michael Dorn's cat got Will Wheaton's cat pregnant, and he's refusing to pay kitten support, and they have this big feud. So obviously, it's a little absurd, but it's funny. There's also a Dance Revolution contest gone awry, and you read it, you'll laugh. If you don't, I'll give you your money back. So anyway, as a regular Comic-Con goer. Moses Farnsworth knows that culture, but he's also been bullied and ostracized his whole life, kind of because of who he is and the things that he was into. He wasn't into the sports and the athletics. He's got a weird mom who's obsessed with squirrel sex and maybe not squirrel sex. She definitely is suspecting that squirrel A and squirrel B have a thing. They're like, I don't like it. They're not married. She's a real weird character, but she's hilarious. Weird in the best kind of ways. So anyway, he has a favorite book series, which is based on Game of Thrones. Like, it's kind of an homage to that. It's called The Knights of the Alluvian Age. And Will Wheaton is supposed to play the star in the movie as the titular role. And so they're there to raise money for their Kickstarter campaign to get this movie off the ground. That's why Will Wheaton's at Comic-Con and this whole thing is happening. And the whole thing is tied into some mob stuff, so it's kind of a fun crime book. And it's also got some mysterious components with all the little Easter eggs that that nerds would be able to pick up on. And it's also got the author of Knights of the Alluvian Age is Sharon J.R.R. McCrum. Sharon McCrum wrote a book called Bimbos of the Death Sun. And the book's kind of an homage to that, where it's a murder mystery at a Comic-Con. It was written back in the 80s, I think. So this was kind of where some of that came from. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt. Rick Diego rested his head against the cold brick and leaned against a urinal as he closed his eyes. The day had barely begun, and he didn't know why, but he felt hungover. The mental exhaustion had caught up. He tightened his nostrils and tried not to inhale too deeply. The toilets had begun to smell, as expected, but pockets of the general population had also begun to emit a mysterious aura that no amount of Axe body spray could mask. Something like a post-asparagus musk. Wrinkling his nose in disgust, Diego washed his hands and read the sign posted on the mirror. Achievement unlocked. Hands washed. He guessed he might have been one of the proud few to earn such a prestigious award. The detective splashed a little water on his face and began strapping on the layers of leather that made up his Judge Dredd costume. He began to wonder exactly why his partner owned as much leather as he did when Jack Sparrow sauntered through the lavatory. Odors don't lie, and he was most certainly not faking the rum-drunk walk as he staggered to the urinal. "Release the Kraken!" the pirate yelled as he unzipped his pants and pissed all over the wall, fully 2 inches left of the privy. Diego sighed, put on his helmet, venturing back towards the craziness that was TrollCon. He got close to his table and spotted Farnsworth trying his best to shoo away a booth barnacle who wouldn't stop talking. The balding man with an itchy neckbeard stood barely 4'10", probably weighed around 300 pounds, and smelled like he'd eaten all the asparagus. Diego wasn't certain he was speaking English even. "That's why Makoto Kasanugi is totally my waifu," he said in a grating, high-pitched voice. He glanced down the aisle at a teenage girl wearing the character's skin-tight bodysuit and licked his chapped lips. "I think she could learn to love me," he said in a borderline whisper. Diego stopped right in front of the booth and stood uncomfortably close to the diminutive troll. He stared him down. El Creepo cringed and took a step back. Nothing about Diego's demeanor indicated he wanted to take up the man on the free hugs offer advertised by his pit-stained t-shirt. "I see you looking at my daughter," he lied. The detective waved to the anime cosplayer as if he knew her, and she waved back without explanation. "Oh, there's Bulma way over there. Maybe she's looking for some Dragon Balls." The human hut hybrid waddled away as quickly as his Kowakian monkey lizard legs could carry him. "Woo!" exclaimed Farnsworth. He reached under the table and pulled out an aerosol can. He hoped the Febreze was capable of defeating the lingering cloud in mortal combat. Diego plopped down into his chair so they could continue watching for their targets. Wheaton wouldn't be back at the table for a while, and Doran seemed all the better for it. "Is it just me, or did the craziness actually amplify overnight?" he asked as he removed his sweaty helmet. An unmistakable weariness colored his voice. Farnsworth nodded and jotted down notes on their subjects. Kubrick had announced a huge panel to discuss Knights of the Alluvian Age with Wheaton on the following day. He was making a killing selling t-shirts and last-minute additions to the Kickfunder. Only those participants in shirts or who gave online admission to the exclusive panel and discussion got in. Diego watched his weird, spandex-clad partner. He could tell Farnsworth wanted to join that panel in the worst possible way, but refused to let his current duties slide. What's the big deal with this Alluvian Knights book anyway? Farnsworth brightened. I can hardly believe you haven't heard of it. Groundbreaking, exhilarating. He realized he was talking like a newspaper review. It builds a very real, very big world where some unknown heroes, the little guys, rise up and make it a better place. Elves, dwarves, all of those kinds of fantasy elements that sort of make the world better somehow. Certainly different. You got quiet for a moment. Not everybody is good at life. For people who don't feel like they fit in, he motioned to the crowd around them, fantasy helps them escape those bad feelings. We're not stuck on the outside anymore. We're finally important. And I honestly believe that everyone feels like that at some point in their life. So that's, I think, where a lot of kids come from, is they feel like they're on the outside looking in. And I think fandoms, the nerd community, embraces them and really props them up. And I think that's why we need more and more. Like, that's the main reason why I've been so upset during the COVID-19 pandemic that we don't have cons and panels. I look at things like, because I work with youth and I look at statistics all the time, like youth suicide rate and depression rates. And they're spiking. Like, when you don't have access, and I get it, we have social media and we have things that connect us. Those aren't real connections. There's nothing like sitting across a table playing a game with a friend. And sometimes when you're asking, what are you doing later, or how's your character coming? You're not asking how your character's coming. You're asking, how are you doing? And we understand that intrinsically. It's something that I've seen over and over when I've worked with kids through gaming. Fantasy makes us all belong. It's not just that the genre is compelling, but fantasy is both just real enough and both foreign enough that it requires mutual buy-in. It allows us and requires us to all play make-believe together. Modern games, I think, have really hit the multiplayer aspect better now, too. I mentioned games like Zombicide. Arkham Horror is another great one. You're all trying to accomplish something together. So you're all winning and losing together. And there's a great amount of camaraderie that comes along with that. RPGs are big on the rise. And here's the thing, that with collaborative gaming, we're investing in each other. And I think that's really where the power comes, because you're wanting to help each other, and then they're wanting to help you. And it's this mutual network of respect and love that we give and we share with each other. And I think there's great power in that, and it pays dividends later on. Like, I've invested in a lot of kids, I mentioned, and seen them much later. There's a guy, his name is Jacob. He was dating a girl named Sincere, and I think they were sure they were going to get married, that they were in love forever. And I see these kids around. They're not married. They've gone their separate ways, and it's been years since I've seen them together, but I've seen them apart in our communities. I actually, you remember the big, over in Marshall, Minnesota, like the people with the face masks and the Nazi symbols on them? I was literally there when that happened. It made national news because I happened to see, I was like, that mullet looks really familiar. And I followed this guy on a motorcycle in. His mullet was hanging on the back of his helmet. It was Jacob. I pulled off and followed him in to have a conversation in Walmart. And then all that craziness happened. But when you invest in other people like that, it pays off in the weirdest kind of ways further down the road. So Jacob was really into like swordsmithing and like the Renaissance Festival and all those things. And let me describe before I tell you what he did for me. I showed you this. So I have this little shelf up in my man cave where I do all my writing. I got a whole bunch of Masters of the Universe action figures kind of lined up. And then I've got some other cool things. So when I go to conventions, I usually dress like Wolverine. It's like, oh, he's the dude that looks like Wolverine. That's how so many people know me. And so I have a whole bunch of really cool things. One of the other things I always wanted when I was a kid, because I lived in the middle of nowhere, the black bag Death of Superman. I got this one autographed here by Dan Jurgens, who was from Minnesota, which is why he comes here very often for conventions. The comic I always wanted, so I'm trying to get all the things I wanted as a kid, right? So I get some other cool things like, because I am a huge Wolverine fan. I always was since I was a kid. This is the new Wolverine #1. You've probably seen this one around. I've got the one where Wolverine lost his adamantium, because this comic came out when I was in was in junior high, and it was all the rage. I had a buddy who had it. We read the snot out of that thing. When I was in high school, we played a lot of TSR's Marvel superheroes, and I've actually gamed Marvel superheroes with a bunch of our kids in our group. Like, let's play something really old school. Don't worry about the rules. I know the rules. I forgot the rules, but they didn't know. They didn't figure it out. I have the ongoing Wolverine #1. This is the one that what are they on? They're like 260 or something before they finally restarted the whole line after Wolverine died. The Death of Wolverine arc, of course, which I also have. But I do have the limited run as well, right? I've actually got all 4 on the original Wolverine miniseries. So all the cool things. This is like my wall of honor, like the shelf where I keep the really, really cool stuff. The way I'm showing you these, it's kind of moving left to right and like how cool they are. And of course, you can't have those without having the Incredible Hulk 168, or 181, I mean. First appearance of Wolverine. Don't tell my wife how much I paid for it. It's a secret. And then I have this thing. Jacob made me, just for the impact I had in his life, he's like, I want to make you a sword. So like he actually handsmithed this whole thing. And just because he's like, man, I really valued the impact that you had on my life. I'm like, that is super cool. Sometimes, you don't go looking to impact people's lives or what you're going to get out of it. But if you go and you try and engage people, whether it's through gaming or just sharing life in general, there's always a reward. We don't seek the reward. We seek the community. Rewards are nice. Sometimes they cut watermelons. So if you guys have any questions about my books, what it is that I do, I'd love to answer them. If you want to come and play with He-Man, that's cool too. Yeah. Any questions?
So what are the projects that you're, so you just finished the 50 Shades of War. What other projects are you working on right now, Chris?
Right now, I am working on the sequel to Ashes of Alushrai. I'm working on edits to Eye of the Storm, which is the sequel to this one. Now, these are in the 90s. There was the game Dragon Dice. This is the only non-Wizards of the Coast owned line that came out of TSR. So my big banner here says Fantasy from the creators of Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance. All that pool that was the brainchild at TSR, where they're pumping out tons of fiction, Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms. What were the other ones? There's a bunch of other ones too. Ravenloft.
Greyhawk, Dark Sun.
Great, yep. So some of those heads were involved in creating the World of Esfa. This was a book. This is actually the same cover art on that. Because, like I said, they got the rights to everything when they bought it. So you may have seen a book looked a lot like that, had a hole cut in there, and had a die in it. It was a promo, it was an actual playable game piece. The only complaint I've heard is like, it doesn't have a hole cut in the middle. I'm like, I will drill you a hole if that's going to make or break whether you're going to like the book, but you're going to miss a bunch of the words. But anyway, so we re-released a bunch of those, the older books. We've added to it. So that's what I'm working on now. I also have this book right here called Shadowless. It's not out. This is just an advanced review copy. People always ask me, like, what's your favorite book? Like the one that you just poured your heart and soul into? I'm like, that's this book. It's very I Am Legend meets, what was the name of that book? Everybody's trapped underground. City of Ember. City of Ember meets I Am Legend, maybe. That's this book. Set up. It's like post-apocalyptic. You find out in the book how we got there. There's like tunnels all through this mountain, underground government bunker, light panels everywhere. No such thing as a shadow because mankind is deathly afraid of shadows. And the lights start going out. And that's the setup. So this is the one I have a lot of high expectations for. I'm actually working. My next project is I want to work on a sequel to this. I have already another short story. It's a prequel. It takes place kind of in this storyline, and now I've got I've got 2 more like full-length sequels I want to do with that. I also want to do a sequel to 50 Shades of Worf called 50 Shades Darker Ages. Will take place instead of a comic convention at a Renaissance festival. And then I've got my ongoing, my Decker's Dozen sci-fi series. A lot of love from Firefly fans. 3 books out. I've got another 7 books planned, I think. So loose notes on it. I know where the story's going. I have this one will be a 15-book series. I've got notes. I've got plot lines interweaving, little things happening now in the initial couple of books that you could go back in the last book and go, oh man, I see the setup now. So it's fun when you can plan things on a large scope, and when you really it's when you know you're going to write the whole thing. And that's the problem with a lot of authors nowadays. Like, we're still, Game of Thrones is done, right? But where's the books? We're waiting on like 2 books. There's 1 book. I forget what it is, but yeah, you also got to get done and write the book at the end of the day.
When is Shadowless coming out?
Good question. I don't know. I was talking to a guy today about it. I would love to see it placed with somebody like Ban or Daw or Tor. That's kind of ideally where I'd love to see it, because I think it's the perfect niche for that book. We'll see whatever happens. I have talked and had some interest from some major publishers. Nothing has. They work so slow. I'm like, by the time you could give me a yes, I've written 3 other books. Yeah, I tend to get that though. If you haven't figured out by just how fast I speak, I'm churning out words all the time, whether I'm typing them or I'm speaking them. So, yeah, I wish I knew. Hope if I don't have a solid bite from a publishing company I have great faith in. So there's a lot of small presses, like even some of the ones that produce a lot of very, very good stuff in Minnesota, like Grey Wolf Press and stuff. I don't trust Grey Wolf Press to have the same intense passion that I have to get my book into people's hands. They would sell a lot of copies. They're very Minnesota based and interested in Minnesota stuff and their authors. Still, I as soon as I get this in, if I'm back in the Comic-Con circuit after COVID, I'll sell a crap ton of books. And if they can't sell at least as many as I can by their efforts, like I had the same problem with the first book on Wolf of the Tesseract, was with a traditional publisher, and I'm like, got a royalty check, my first royalty check, right? It's like $2.27. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, I've sold I've made that times 30. Like in the last, it was like every 6 months, I think I got royalty checks, or twice a year. I'm like, and I was still pretty small time at that point, and I had like 5 books out. And so I was like, you know what? Whatever it is I'm doing is way better than what you're doing. I think there are some tools out there where I can maybe take control of this. So this is actually, these are now produced by Tree Shaker Books, which I said, I think I can do that. And so I started Tree Shaker Books, and now I do that. And I if I'm not traditionally publishing somewhere where I have great faith in it, because they got a great built-in audience, like Ban or Tor, Ban with their sci-fi, Tor with their their fantasy and sci-fi, Daw does some of the same stuff, just in a slightly different ways. But they're marketing to the exact sorts of people that are going to be built-in sales off of it. So if I'm not with somebody like that, I'll publish it myself, because I do a pretty decent job with some of those. So like all of these, this is a decent enough job that I do. This line here, these are all Tree Shaker books. So I was able to actually secure the IP licensing for what was one of my, like when I was a teenager, was like, this is amazing. We played this game like every day, like skipped out of study hall to go roll dice in the back of some room somewhere. And now I get to write all of their fiction. I'm like, that's cool.
When was your first novel published?
2005 or 6. Yeah, somewhere in there. Was with a small traditional publisher out of Duluth. And I didn't know any of how the stuff worked back then. I was just writing, and that book took me years to write. That was The Caicos Realm, which I know you have in your library here. There's the first book in there. There's 3 books in the series now. It will be a 7-book series when it's done. It's a little lower on my to-do list to write books in this series. It'll eventually get done, but I'm gonna George R.R. Martin that one and just take my time with it, which is weird. I mean, I already know, I know what happens. If I just took a year, I could write all the rest of them. But then the fans of these ones would be really upset with me. So there's a little balance with that. But there's about 2006-ish, and that's when I found when they were getting bought out from another publisher shortly after. So I was like, man, well, what do I do now? I better find a different publisher. The publishing company told me, hey, we're getting bought out. We know that the reason they're buying us out is because they want a couple of our books that we have, and then they're just going to shutter the rest, and your book will just be unavailable because they're not going to have any interest. So I went and started looking, and that's once you start looking. You ever search for something in Google, right? How do I get published? Your phone just rings hey, where's so-and-so of a publisher? That's not how the publishing world really works. Nobody is looking for your book. There's so many people writing books. Publishers do not care. Especially the big publishers, they'll get thousands of submissions every day. So that's why you have to distill your book down into a tweet. And it's got to be good enough for them to look at the rest of your letter. And then your letter's got to be good enough for them to look at your first page. And if the first page doesn't get thrown away outright, then maybe they'll ask for the first chapter. And if they like that, maybe 6 months after you've sent that to them, they'll say, okay, well, you can send us the full manuscript and maybe we'll publish it. It is a very, you're throwing a baseball across a football field trying to put the ball through the eye of a needle. That's how tough the competition is. And then we have things like 50 Shades of Grey, who I'm making a farce on, that is so incredibly badly written that, but there's a reason, because there's a built-in market, right? I was mentioning earlier that I played in a band, and think like Bob Dylan, right? Some of the songs Bob Dylan wrote, and he hasn't made a ton of money. He's very famous, writes very good songs, but you know who has made a ton of money? Beyonce. Just music. It's what? These are 6 words in your whole song, and you're shaking your booty. $5 billion. Here's the money. It's not about do you write good stuff. It's about do I have a built-in market for it right now. So I begun to learn where all the traps and the pitfalls were and what to avoid, and when begin to see who's blowing smoke and full of crap. And most people. They use, scammers will use targeting metrics, SEO, all these things on the internet to find and position their ads. So when, how do I get published? And people, get published today, be a best-selling author. I've seen those exact words on advertisements. No, you won't. Yeah, you could get published today, but it'll be garbage because if you think you're ready to publish, guess what? You're not, unless it's already been edited 3 times. And not by your first grade English teacher and your best friend, because those people are not going to be qualified to edit your book. And you're going to have your nephew do the cover. I've seen this book a million times, and it is bad. So doing things right is a big thing, but you don't even know what to do right, because only the scammers, the people who are trying to make $1 off of the author, are the people that are contributing voices to the pool. Because they're selling the dream. This is what I want to hear, is that you love me, you love my book and my story, and want to publish it. Yeah, we do. We love it so much. Just give us $10,000 and we'll get you a copy in print, and it can be for sale on Amazon.com. Everybody sells on Amazon.com. It is not hard. I consult with a lot of independent authors. I'm like, if you just want to be published on Amazon.com, I was talking to a guy in Australia 2 weeks ago. I'm like, he's like, I want to publish my dad's book. I'm like, yeah, I can have it published tomorrow. Send me the manuscript. But do you want it just available for sale, or do you want people to buy it? Do you want it to be good? Do you want it to be edited? Do you want it to do justice to your dad's legacy? Because you're going to have to do some work if that's what you want. Because if you write it and you release it when it's bad to begin with, the internet is full of not nice people. They will let you know with 1-star reviews. And yes, 1 or 2 1-star reviews is a badge of honor. Look up any of my books. I've got a couple. If it's filled with nothing but 1-star reviews, then maybe the problem wasn't with the trolls. Although I did write a story about that in this series here. I got a big omnibus down here. It's actually in there. It's a kind of in-between quote. It's called 1 Star. About so you've seen Misery, or read the book Misery, right? Stephen King, like, she's crazy. Kathy Bates captures him. I actually have the exact same car that he drove when he crashed. I didn't know that until I was watching Misery with my daughter. She's like, I heard about that book. I'm like, let's watch it. Watch the movie. So we're watching it. She's like, that's your same color, everything. Like we're looking it up on because you're watching on Amazon, on the video, and it tells you all about it in the notes on your phone. I'm like, the book says it's this, but I'm like, that's my car. It's actually slightly different. So we knew all it was, and we nerded out on some of the minor details. And then she captures him, breaks his feet. That was awesome. My daughter laughed. I'm not sure if I should be worried. Anyway, Misery in reverse though. So the author kidnaps an Amazon.com reviewer and holds them hostage, and he reads him the book. Like, you're gonna read it and you're gonna like it. And because the guy his life went off the rails. As soon as he was pushing publish on Amazon and it went live, his wife died in a car accident. And so he just pinned all of his life on this one thing, and he just lost it. But because I write a lot of like stuff with a supernatural twist, it turned out that everything he was writing was actually in his book, which is like the supernatural thriller kind of about this cult, very Cthulhu-esque thing about the cults, and their impact on releasing the great elder gods and the old ones. Like, this is what his book was about. Like, that stuff was actually happening. And he realized that he like started losing control of his life. Like, it's a fun little story. And I got a review on Amazon. They're like, I don't dare give this 1 star. And it was interesting and compelling. But yeah, people will be a troll on purpose. Because like I said, we're just the same thing that I was doing when I was a kid. Kids bullying other kids. It's way easier to bully people now with the anonymity of the internet. Any other questions?
What would you say is your biggest inspiration to motivate you to write? Not your ideas for stories, but that really gets you motivated to sit down and really dig into it.
Yeah, I give this advice to a lot of people. I can be kind of scatterbrained. As you can see, I've written just in all these different genres, and I only brought my sci-fi and fantasy. I have almost twice as many books that could be on the table. I find that creating a strategy. So I'm a strategist. You ever do like Taylor Johnson's Strengths Finders and things like that? I'm like, strategist is my top thing. If y'all want to play some Risk later and can make you cry. Actually, we taught my boss Settlers of Catan the other day. Me and he was a company retreat. He's like, yeah, I always want to learn to play this game. We sat him down, explained him the rules. I got it. I understand. A couple of samples. Myself, 2 other guys who do the same things that I do in different communities. Oh, we spanked him so bad. We all just were like, looking at each other like, yeah, we totally took the boss down. So anyway, strategy. So my strategy is I find the same place to write it, make it consistent, try and do it the same time, do it when you're fresh. So I typically will go to the gym early in the morning, and then before work, I'll sit down and try and write so many scenes. I don't write chapters or words. I heavily outline, because I want to know where my story's going. Especially if I'm writing 7 to 15 books in a series, and I have a place I want to get to. If I'm not trying to get someplace, well, I'm just gonna be walking around in circles. And if you've ever read a book like that, it is no fun to read when they don't go anywhere. So I try and make sure I know what I'm doing, building some good habits, and then write consistently. And I keep a journal when I'm writing on a book, and I'm 50,000 words in, and I really, really want to write a different book. I write all those notes in a different spot, and I can come back to them later. I got like 16 other books that I could write just on my notes. Great, completely different ideas. May or may not ever get to them, but at least I can get them out of me and in a place where I can come back because I didn't forget them later. And that's, I mean, if you read a lot of guys that talk about like business sense and those sorts of things, you know, like general, like how to live your best life type novels, you know, self-help or whatever the genre is. They're like, when you're trying to fall asleep, and you've got this great, just keep a notebook by your bed. Write the stuff down. You can get to it later. If you get it out of your head and off your chest, then you can relax. So I try and do that a lot. I have so many notebooks.
Any other questions?
How many books, if this is just the sci-fi, how many books in total do you have?
More than 30 if you include the ebooks.
Okay.
People are like, how do you have so much time? I don't sleep well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christopher.
Well, thank you for bringing me. Is there anybody have English courage? Remember the movie lines.
But, thanks for coming. We're real happy to have you, and hopefully we'll get to see you again real soon.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.